I honestly can't believe this day has come, but it's here and it's real. So let's take a look at Zack Snyder's Justice League.
We live in a society.
But to really understand the momentous occasion that this is, we need to go all the way back to 2013 and the release of Man of Steel. Coming off the back of Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy, DC decided to create their own cinematic universe. Marvel had had a ton of success with the MCU, with the Avengers dropping back in 2012. The desire to bring the Justice League to the big screen as a franchise to rival that of the MCU makes a ton of sense. DC Comics are full of diverse and deep characters, and with both Batman and Superman as the icons of DC, it made a ton of sense to kickstart this new cinematic universe with those two. That's when Zack Snyder entered. He came in to direct a solo film about Superman. Personally, I'm not a massive fan of Man of Steel. Despite occasional good moments, I found it mostly dull and uninteresting. But the one thing that is undeniable is that it is completely different to what the MCU was and is doing. It was a story with meaning and ramifications that follow all the way through into Justice League. Snyder didn't want to make a flashy, colourful adventure. He aimed to make something real and tell a human story about the roles we are born into. And in that regard, he achieves his goal. Man of Steel is a flawed film, but one with a powerful meaning and brilliant performances by the entire cast.
And you were right.
But shouldn't the people know the hero who saved them?
A hero can be anyone.
Kal-El is chosen by his father to be sent to Earth as its protector, because unlike everyone else on Krypton, Kal-El was not born into a role. He was not engineered to fulfill a specific role in society. He had no role, and so he's sent to Earth as the sole survivor of Krypton. Of course, that's not true, because just by sending him there, his father is assigning him a role. That's reinforced later when his human parents tell him to be a good man and to hide his powers. Throughout his entire life, Clark is being forced to be who everyone else wants him to be. First with his parents, and then later with basically the entire world. He is a god, a religious figure, an alien, a savior, a hero, a lover, a monster. In the final moments of the film, Zod, despite his defeat, gets in one final victory against Superman by forcing him to kill him, forcing his hand one last time and only strengthening Clark's inability to make any real choices in his life. In many ways, this is the same with all of us. Our parents make decisions for us when we're young, and since we live in a society, things are determined without our control. Expectations box us in our entire lives, especially if you are born poor or black or gay or basically anything that isn't straight white and male. Man of Steel reflects, with its Kryptonian lead, a story that is fundamentally human, and it's hard not to admire it for that. Then, of course, the film released to less than perfect reviews, we'll say. Audiences were expecting a Nolan-esque take on the Man of Steel, or a MCU fun adventure with Superman, of which the film was neither.
The devils don't come from hell beneath us, no. No, they come from the sky.
Then came Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. Audiences did not like this film when it released. It came out around the same time as Captain America: Civil War, which is a great example of how superhero team-up films can do well and balance their characters. But then again, so is BVS. Both films tackle the ideas of superheroes being held accountable for their actions. To quote Snyder's first superhero flick, "Who watches the Watchmen?" Bruce Wayne here is hardened. He's already lost one adopted son to the Joker, and after experiencing the mass destruction wrought by Superman in his fight against General Zod in the previous film, is now out on a mission to stop the hero. There is so much here about Clark not having to deal with the deaths that happened because of his inaction. If he had killed Zod earlier when he had the chance, thousands of more people would be alive. Now, that philosophy may come at odds with what we expect from Batman. After all, if he had killed Joker years ago, there would be so many more people still alive. But this Bruce is different from the cinematic entries we've seen before. He is far less hopeful and is determined to deliver his brand of justice to the criminals of Gotham and the gods above. Batman kills. He's not afraid to slice a guy's throat as he makes his way through a room. He wants justice, and he wants to see the Man of Steel suffer for what he's done to the innocent people. A lot of this hatred is likely displaced, of course. having to suffer through the loss of Robin and his parents without any way of avenging them. Here, he sees a way to finally get justice for those who lost their lives because of Superman. Of course, BVS also has a small role for Wonder Woman, and cameos from the rest of the members of the Justice League, which they get to flesh out a lot more in the Snyder Cut, which we'll get to in a little bit, I promise. But for me, the standout of BVS is Jesse Eisenberg's Lex Luthor. Now, people didn't like him when the film originally came out, but I think that this Mark Zuckerberg kind of modern young version of Lex is exactly what this story needed, and I think he fits perfectly into the world of Zack Snyder's DCEU. Now, he too, like Batman, aims to take down the Man of Steel, but he's not trying to kill him, no. Instead, he wants to show the world who Superman really is. He is not a god. He is not all good. He is idealized. He is an illusion, and he, like everyone, has a dark side, and Lex wants to show that to the world. And that plan culminates when Lex kidnaps Martha Kent and orders Superman to kill Batman. This would prove to the world that despite his powers, Superman is human too. He is flawed, capable of murder, prejudice, and undeserving of their praise. There's a great parallel here between the two super rich characters of Lex and Bruce. Bruce lost his loving parents when he was young, and so instead seeks vengeance on the criminals of Gotham City. Whereas Lex had to live with an abusive and hateful father who the world adored. He couldn't convince the people of the terrible person his father was, but maybe he can show the world Kal-El's propensity for evil. BVS is a genuinely great movie and one I highly recommend re-watching, or of course watching for the first time, before you check out Zack Snyder's Justice League. Speaking of which, the original Justice League came to cinemas in late 2017, and it was bad. Partially directed by Snyder, but largely reworked and reshot by the sexist and abusive Joss Whedon. It was a mess. And immediately, the internet started lobbying for Warner Bros. To #release the Snyder Cut. I'll be honest, I hated Joss Whedon's Justice League, and I was in no rush to rewatch it or rewatch an edited version done by Zack Snyder. And after years of lobbying, I certainly never expected it to actually happen. But then, in 2020, they announced that Zack Snyder's Justice League would be releasing exclusively on HBO Max, with a massive budget to reshoot sequences and even create new scenes for his version of the story. Then on March 18th, 2021, it was released, and we finally got to see the true vision Snyder had for Justice League. And it's fucking good. Obviously, if you're at all interested, you should go and watch it yourself and then, come back to this review. It is easily worth the time invested. It is 4 hours long. But there's so much here to look at, so let's dive right into it. The story largely remains the same. Steppenwolf comes to Earth in search of the Mother Boxes, which can be used to reform a planet that he can then give to his master Darkseid. Of course, our heroes don't like that plan too much, and so Bruce Wayne unites a team that consists of Batman, The Flash, Cyborg, Wonder Woman, Aquaman, and eventually a reborn Superman to combat Steppenwolf and his horde of parademons.
Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall.
Zack Snyder's Justice League has a lot of heavy lifting to do when it comes to setting up the members of its team. Of course, people like Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, and Lois Lane are well established by this point, and even now in 2021, Aquaman has his own solo film. But Ezra Miller's Flash and Ray Fisher's Cyborg are largely unknown to us when we start the film. The Flash gets a decent amount of setup with a very cool slow-mo scene involving a pet store, hot dogs, and Kiersey Clemens. So that is actually one of the biggest additions for the Snyder Cut. It was originally shot for the film back in 2017, but was recreated and placed back in for the Snyder version. But Cyborg is really where the film's heart comes from. Justice League is a far more hopeful affair than Snyder's previous work in the DCEU. After Superman's sacrifice at the end of BVS, our characters, and in fact the world, has rallied around that symbol that he created, a symbol of hope. which is, after all, what the S means on Krypton. Despite the awful things Ray Fisher had to deal with while shooting the 2017 version of Justice League, and the blatant racism he faced from Joss Whedon and other executives at Warner Bros., he does a phenomenal job, and it's largely because of him and his performance that both Cyborg and the movie works so well. It helps that he's given an extensive origin story that perfectly shows off to us his powers, his kind heart, and his relationship with his father, the head of Star Labs, who is a constant throughout the story. Near the end of Justice League, Cyborg reaches his catalyst moment, and he is finally able to let go of all the pain and grief he has had to face in his life and forgive those who love him. It is a truly touching sequence, and I am not ashamed to say that I genuinely teared up during a few of the Cyborg scenes. In fact, you could really argue that Victor Stone is the protagonist of Justice League. Superman is obviously, dead for most of it, and Batman is there a lot, but he really acts as just a way to get the team together. Cyborg carries the majority of the emotional weight, and the story between him and his father is intrinsically tied to the outcome of the mother boxes. I think a special shout needs to go to actor Joe Morton, who portrays Silas Stone, Cyborg's father, throughout the film. He's great in this, and he's also great in the sci-fi series Eureka, where he portrays a lead. You should go check that show out if you haven't seen it. But yeah, Cyborg is great.
Do you bleed? You will.
The bones of the film may be unaltered, but all the additional and extended scenes really help to flesh out the world and the characters of the DCEU. And all those new scenes are either key to that, or they're just awesome. Obviously, some of the CGI here does look a little bit iffy, but there are some really cool new sequences, including an awesome fight between the old gods and Darkseid. In fact, Darkseid's appearances, although few and far between, are some of the coolest moments of the film. Getting to see him as this overbearing, brooding power is so awesome, and it's such a shame that we're not going to get to see more of him in any of the potential Justice League sequels. I also want to quickly note that the film is presented in a 4:3 aspect ratio, which a lot of people are having issues with. I personally didn't mind it. You got to keep in mind as well, of course, that Snyder wanted this to be seen on IMAX screens, on as big a screen as possible, and that aspect ratio is ideal for those kind of screenings. The fact that this is the end of Snyder's time with DC is bittersweet. It's amazing that he gets to come back and tell his version of this story. And there are so many exciting things set up here, and of course, the film is just really good, that it makes the loss of those potential sequels and any Cyborg movies all the worse. Seeing characters like the Martian Manhunter, who was long expected to appear in the film, finally show up is such a satisfying moment. And even the little bit more of the Knightmare reality we get to see is so cool. Getting to see Affleck's Batman finally come face to face with Leto's Joker is such an incredible scene, and is honestly kind of mind-blowing that that hadn't already happened in the DCEU. The added gore and swearing feels perfectly at home here, and that all culminates during the Batman and Joker scene with the coolest F-bomb I have seen since Alita. Despite your opinions on the original Justice League, or on Snyder's previous work in the DCEU, I highly recommend checking out Zack Snyders' Justice League. It is a relentless, visceral throw-wide of a film, and it's so much fun. The fact that the Snyder Cut is real is a miracle, and the idea that people online can come together to rally behind something and make something like this happen, that is important. That is powerful. That is hope.